A grand estate sits atop the cliffs of Newport, Rhode Island, familiar to TV viewers as the eerie Collinwood Manor. Over 5 years, the series Dark Shadows turned this limestone fortress into the nation's premier Gothic icon, serving as the lair of vampire Barnabas Collins and his doomed kin. Yet, well before the film crews showed up in 1966, Seaview Terrace had already gained infamy from happenings far darker than any penned plot. A string of fatalities, financial collapses, and eerie calamities shadowed its proprietors so relentlessly that the place earned a spot as Newport's most infamous spot. When producer Dan Curtis scouted for an ideal spot to shoot his otherworldly daytime drama, he stumbled upon a structure that needed no tricks to look spectral. This tale unfolds at Seaview Terrace, where true events crafted the narrative. During the summer of 1923, Newport, Rhode Island, reigned supreme as the hub of American opulence. Stretching along Ocean Drive and Bellevue Avenue, the country's richest clans had erected what they modestly dubbed summer retreats. But such labels scarcely did justice to these lavish domains. The Breakers, Cornelius Vanderbilt II's creation, boasted 70 rooms over 125,000 square feet. Marble House, Alva Vanderbilt's project, included a ballroom echoing the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. Rosecliff mimicked the Grand Trianon. These weren't mere dwellings. They stood as bold assertions of economic dominance, forged from limestone, marble, and opulence. Amid this arena of lavish rivalry arrived Edson Bradley. Born on January 12, 1863 in Chicago, he was the offspring of a respected doctor who had shrewdly sunk money into copper mines across the American West early on. Following his father's death in 1894, Edson took the reins of mining ventures spanning Michigan's Upper Peninsula to Arizona's peaks. By 1920, the Bradley Mining Company churned out millions of pounds of copper each year, placing Edson among the top 10 richest people in the U.S. His wealth hovered around $80 million, equivalent to roughly $1.2 to $2 billion today. Yet Bradley sought more than stewardship of the family enterprise. Reaching age 60, he set his sights on Newport, aiming to craft a legacy that would endure beyond him and cement the Bradley legacy alongside the clans that had shaped U.S. high society for the prior 5 decades. He envisioned a true palace. In 1922, Bradley acquired a plot on Newport's eastern fringe, at the junction of Oker Point Avenue and the Atlantic. This site commanded the coast's loftiest vantage, with sheer drops of almost 60 feet to the surf-tossed rocks beneath. From there, the vast Atlantic unfurled to the distant skyline. He shelled out $175,000 for the acreage, about $3 million in today's dollars, planning to invest far more in the edifice to come. Bradley enlisted Howard Greenlee, a 43-year-old New York architect, fresh from studies at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, at the peak of his ingenuity. Valley, yet tailored for a contemporary valley, yet tailored for a contemporary U.S. home. Indiana limestone would sheath the outside, prized for withstanding salty winds and supporting the intricate carvings the aesthetic required. The roofline would incorporate dormers, turrets, and a towering central spire soaring 5 levels over the core building. Work kicked off that spring of 1923. Bradley brought in the George A. Fuller Company, builders of New York's Flatiron Building. Over 200 laborers swarmed the grounds, digging foundations and anchoring columns into solid rock. Steel skeletons climbed through the warmer months into autumn. By the cold season, the stone exterior started emerging. Plans outlined 64 rooms across 4 main levels, plus attic staff quarters and basement utilities. The ground level held entertaining spaces, a soaring 2-story entry hall, a drawing room of 40 by 30 feet, lined with 16th-century French chateau oak panels, a library shelving Bradley's rare first editions, a ballroom for 200 revelers, claimed the full south wing. Up on the second floor lay family sleeping quarters and personal lounges. Bradley's master suite dominated the West End, with views over sea and grounds alike. Julia Bradley's mirrored it across the corridor, the rest filled with guest chambers, each sporting private baths and hearths. The third level offered more visitor stays and helps quarters. The tower stood as Greenla's boldest flourish. Soaring 90 feet into the air, it offered little utility except for a spiral staircase leading to an observation deck. Up there in the lookout chamber, guests could gaze across the full expanse of the property and spot vessels gliding along the distant shoreline. Bradley insisted that the structure be prominent from all principal routes leading into Newport, serving as a bold emblem of his entry into the ranks of the city's upper crust. Work on it continued throughout 1924 and stretched into 1925. In the end, the project surpassed $2 million in expenses, equivalent to about $35 million today. That total excluded the decor Bradley acquired on European excursions, Flemish tapestries, pieces linked to André Charles Boulle, artworks by lesser 18th-century French artists. Every item came with records, coverage under insurance, and transport over the ocean. Come June 1925, the Bradleys settled in. Household help unpacked the luggage. Pieces were arranged per precise layouts. Cooks fired up the stoves in a space fitted with cutting-edge gadgets of the era. Seaview Terrace, the name Bradley gave his domain, now ranked with Newport's grandest estates. Local papers marked the occasion with short notices. The Bradleys had entered the seasonal social circle. What the press overlooked was Bradley's timing. He'd erected his grand statement, just as fortunes shifted. The copper trade started weakening in 1924. By 1925, rates dropped consistently, with after-war needs waning and fresh South American sites overwhelming supplies with low-cost metal. Bradley's ventures, which had raked in huge gains amid the conflict, now barely covered costs. Maintaining the house demanded 26 employees. Yearly upkeep topped $100,000. He'd crafted his fortress, yet such strongholds demand endless resources, and the wellspring of his riches was vanishing quicker than insiders let on. When the Bradleys threw their inaugural gala at Seaview Terrace that August of 1925, economic strains were already building. Visitors, enchanted by the stone exterior and woven wall hangings, couldn't suspect that their hosts were tipping into decline, a fall hastened by the house itself. Stretched across 2 levels, its panels of glass and steel reflected the grandeur of the estate. The foyer was a testament to the family's wealth and status, a place where the elite could gather and revel in their privilege, stretched across 2 levels, its panels of oak rescued from a Loire Valley chateau, and pieced together by artisans who labored 6 months to align every segment. A sweeping stair curved up to a balcony, where a 17th-century stained glass panel showed rural idols of herders with their sheep. Afternoon rays pierced the hues, scattering blue and gold hues over the marble below. In the salon, a hearth of caen stone bore a shelf held by caryatids, modeled after those at Fontainebleau. Over it dangled a canvas credited to François Boucher. Upholstery in silk damask covered the sofas, while inlaid sideboards and a pianoforte, once owned by a low-born Habsburg, its lid etched with their emblem, suited the scale. Across from the entry, the study filled with shelves of American walnut reaching from floor to ceiling. Bradley gathered some 3,000 books, among them Dickens' Firsts and Shakespeare's full set in a 1685 folio. A central desk sat under a fixture, updated from gaslight to electric bulbs. Panes overlooked the grounds and sea, angled by the designer to block views of nearby homes. The dance hall claimed the whole south side of the main level, 70 feet long by 40 wide, with a 20-foot vaulted top over herringbone woodwork in interlocking rings. Gilt medallions, suspended crystal fixtures. Boasted pro-level tools, 3 ovens, dual fuel range, and a convection oven boasted pro-level tools. 3 ovens, dual cooktops, a cooler spanning one side. Pantries stocked enough for a month of meals for residents and help alike, no restocking needed. The wine cellar kept a steady 55-degree temperature and stored Bradley's assortment of French wines, featuring multiple cases of Chateau Lafite from the 1870s. Up on the second floor lay the family's personal quarters. Bradley's own set of rooms took up the southwest corner, boasting views out toward the sea and the rose garden that Julia Bradley arranged for in the spring of 1926. His sleeping chamber spanned 30 feet by 20 feet. Next to it, a cozy sitting area allowed for confidential discussions. The attached bath included marble sourced from Carrara, along with gleaming nickel fittings. Julia Bradley's quarters echoed her spouse's layout, positioned across the main corridor. At the heart of the structure stood the tower, reached via a winding staircase that started on the 3rd level and ascended 90 feet straight up to a lookout chamber at the peak. This circular space, 12 feet across, offered panes of glass in all directions. Such a perch revealed the full sweep of the property below. Bradley had ordered a telescope installed there, fixed on a stand by the east-facing window. On serene nights, he would ascend to gaze at vessels gliding past on the distant sea. The property covered 12 acres in total. Its landscapes followed designs by Frederick Law Olmsted, Jr. The southern side featured elegant gardens with boxwood borders shaped into precise forms. At the crossroads of the primary walkways rose a fountain, seldom turned on since the splash of water clashed with the steady whisper of waves crashing right at the cliff's brink. Running Seaview Terrace cost over $100,000 each year. Property taxes hit $18,000 annually, more than what most U.S. households brought in over 10 years. For someone of Bradley's riches back in 1925, such outlays posed no real issue. Yet as his mining ventures faltered later in the decade, keeping up grew ever tougher. Trouble first surfaced that fall of 1926. Bradley learned that copper values had dipped under the break-even point at his biggest Arizona operation. That site supported 300 employees and had turned profits for 3 decades. He halted work there pending better markets, but they never recovered. Into 1927, 2 more sites shut down. The revenue that once backed Bradley's way of life was slipping away, yet the clifftop home still demanded its upkeep, no matter the economy. Julia Bradley spotted the shift before anyone else. Her partner devoted more hours to his office, poring over accounts and holding calls with mine managers and money experts. The lively suppers that marked their initial 2 seasons at Seaview Terrace grew rarer. Even when company came, Bradley would slip out soon after, heading up to his tower perch to brood in the shadows over the waves. Come June 1928, Bradley endured what his doctor called a breakdown from nerves. At 65, the pressure of seeing his wealth crumble had sparked undeniable bodily woes. Nights without sleep, no hunger, bouts of disorientation. For 3 weeks, he stayed bedbound as Julia Bradley oversaw his treatment and tried to uphold a facade of routine. Upon his return to the household, Bradley seemed shrunken. He'd shed pounds, and his complexion had turned ashen. On September 15, 1928, a housemaid came upon Edson Bradley in the upper tower chamber. He'd made his way up the helical stairs in the wee hours and settled into the seat, aimed at the eastern vista. The telescope stayed shrouded. As first light crept over the sea, she discovered him. He'd passed at 65. The doctor inspecting the remains concluded a severe cardiac event had taken him. He'd slipped away in solitude, eyes fixed on the Atlantic and a far-off line he'd never cross. The grand residence meant to proclaim his success had instead marked his downfall, and Seaview Terrace would exact further tolls for its splendor in the years ahead. 3 days on, the burial service occurred at Trinity Church in Newport, the very spot where Vanderbilts and Astors had laid their kin to rest. Newport's elite turned out in force, but mostly from duty rather than deep sorrow. Bradley had never truly broken into the tight-knit summer set. He'd erected the most imposing estate, yet showed up too tardily and with excessive zeal. Not many stayed long after. Now a widow at 60, Julia Bradley inherited a lavish house beyond her means to run and a faded mining concern that yielded nothing. When the estate was finally appraised, its value came in at about $4 million, far below the extravagant sums splashed across newspapers during Bradley's life, amounting to less than 1/120th of those inflated figures. Much of the fortune remained locked in unsellable mining holdings. The cash Julia could access totaled under $300,000. Once taxes and obligations were cleared, her inheritance shrank to roughly $150,000. Even the yearly upkeep expenses for the property would drain that sum in under 18 months. Opting to divest, Julia Bradley put the mansion on the market in November 1928, only 2 months following her husband's passing, through a local Newport brokerage. They set the initial price at $750,000. The firm crafted a detailed brochure highlighting the home's highlights and sent it to prospective purchasers in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Not a single bid materialized. The spring of 1929 passed uneventfully, with Yikirish's 0 credible showings. In June, Julia dropped the asking price to $650,000, yet interest stayed non-existent. That summer, she rattled around the vast house solo, supported by a minimal crew of 6 servants. The grand ballroom stayed shuttered. The visitor suites gathered dust. She sealed off the tower room where her spouse had perished, steering clear of that wing altogether. By October 1929, as the stock market tumbled and the country tipped into the Great Depression, Seaview Terrace had lingered unsold for almost a full year. The economic plunge wiped out the slim buyer pool left. Julia cut the price further to $500,000, then $400,000. Her brokers warned that transactions had ground to a halt. No one sought lavish properties anymore. Patience was her only recourse. Come spring 1930, a New York entrepreneur extended a $250,000 proposal, which she snapped up without hesitation. The deal finalized in June. Julia gathered the possessions she could carry, organized an auction for the rest, and left Newport behind forever. She endured another 8 years, passing away in a simple Philadelphia flat in 1938, never setting foot in Rhode Island again. The purchaser, Joseph Freridman, was a 42-year-old apparel entrepreneur whose firm specialized in ladies' outerwear and frocks, yielding solid profits. Though the market crash worried him, Freridman weathered it with minimal damage. As panic gripped others, he spotted potential. Land values had plummeted. Estates once fetching millions now went for pennies on the dollar compared to build costs. Convinced the downturn would prove short-lived, he devised a simple scheme: repurpose the residence as an exclusive club for affluent Jewish households, barred from Newport's traditional venues. Places like the Newport Country Club and Newport Reading Room upheld unspoken yet ironclad exclusions for Jewish participants, hallmarks of elite Anglo-Saxon circles. Freridman pictured Seaview Terrace as a welcome haven. In July 1930, he relocated his household there and launched upgrades right away. The ballroom would host meals and soirees. Lounges would occupy the drawing room and library. Overnight accommodations awaited out-of-town guests. He engaged an architect for a pool and tennis facilities on the south grounds, with expenditures capped at $75,000. The club debuted in summer 1931, boasting 48 charter members who each contributed a $1,000 entry fee. The inaugural year looked encouraging. Suppers abounded, kids romped on the courts, and the pool buzzed until September's end. But when accounts arrived that fall, Freridman learned operations had overrun estimates by almost 40%. The following year's rolls dipped to 39 households amid worsening economic woes. Even thriving executives trimmed extravagances. He slashed yearly fees from $500 to $300, though the move merely underscored the evident troubles. By 1933's close, only 22 families remained. Having sunk over $400,000 into the venture, Freridman reached his limit. In spring 1934, he offered Seaview Terrace at $200,000. It sat listed for 14 months until a bidder emerged. The acquirer was Edith Wetmore, widow of George Peabody Wetmore, the former Rhode Island governor and U.S. senator. At 78, Edith acquired Seaview Terrace in July 1935 for $185,000 with no plans to reside there. Her motive was safeguarding it from partition or razing. For the subsequent 4 years, the house stood vacant on her watch, overseen by a groundskeeper quartered in the garage units. That attendant, Thomas Brennan, answered to Mrs. Wetmore's property overseers that the residence proved challenging to warm up, nearly impossible to maintain spotless, and prone to eerie gusts from unknown origins. Doors he secured at night were found ajar by dawn. Panes shook without any breeze. The spiral stairs in the tower especially unnerved him. He steered clear of ascending them unless absolutely necessary, insisting the atmosphere up in the turret chamber differed markedly from the house's other areas, chillier and more oppressive. Brennan wasn't prone to fanciful fears. He'd served as a landscaper for the Wetmore household for 2 decades. Yet Seaview Terrace disturbed him in elusive ways he couldn't quite describe. When Wetmore's representatives pressed for details on his worries, he faltered in offering concrete examples. The place just seemed off-kilter, he confided. He sought a reassignment to a different estate. His plea was approved come spring 1939. The newcomer who took his place, Robert Hayes, a fellow in his younger years, endured only 7 months before tendering his resignation. He gave nothing more than the routine notice stipulated in his agreement. The troubling cycle had taken root. Seaview Terrace had existed for scarcely 15 years, yet it had already squandered one vast inheritance, ruined a commercial enterprise, and repelled 2 custodians, unable to pinpoint their unease, and the shadows were merely starting to gather. By 1940, Edith Wetmore had tired of sustaining an estate she'd never inhabit. At 83, her vitality was waning. The yearly expense of barely preserving Seaview Terrace topped $12,000. The structure was decaying. Water seeped through the roof. The decorative metalwork started showing rust. The grounds had overgrown into a tangle. In March 1940, Edith Wetmore transferred Seaview Terrace to a firm named Ocean View Properties for $125,000. Its backers were 3 siblings, Clarence, Harold, and Morton Kaplan, real estate developers out of Providence, experts in transforming grand homes into multiple dwelling complexes. They viewed Seaview Terrace as perfect for such a revamp. Its scale and design promised space for 12 to 15 upscale residences. The Kaplans figured the overhaul would run $200,000 with leasing fees yielding a steady 12% profit each year. The project kicked off that summer of 1940. Laborers partitioned the inner rooms, erecting fresh partitions and fashioning independent accesses. The majestic main stairway stayed untouched, though extra ones were fitted at the back. Cooking areas appeared in former utility spots. Lavatories got added. The dance hall got chopped into 4 dwellings, marring its former grandeur but yielding the structure's biggest suites. By December 1940, the bulk of the work was done. Initial renters arrived in January 1941. In half a year, 12 out of 15 units had residents. Monthly fees spanned $150 to $300, varying by dimensions and position. The property pulled in about $2,500 a month, sufficient for upkeep and the anticipated gains. For 3 years, Seaview Terrace operated as the Kaplans had planned. Trouble stirred in 1944. A handful of dwellers noted heating glitches even with the updated setup. Some units stayed frigid through the cold season. The Kaplans brought in specialists to check the furnaces and vents. Everything checked out mechanically. No faults explained the uneven warmth. Still, 2 renters cleared out in March 1944, blaming the chill as their exit motive. Those spots were upstairs in the old family wing from the Bradley days. Gripes kept piling up. Residents described footfalls echoing in corridors at odd late hours. Left open portals turned shut on their own. Belongings vanished from flats only to resurface later. Relocated. One woman on the 3rd level said her gems had vanished from a secured compartment and turned up a week on, neatly set out on her eating surface. She pointed fingers at the on-site manager for unauthorized entry. That fellow, Vincent Russo, a 15-year veteran with the Kaplans, flatly rejected the charge. By late 1944, 6 units sat empty. The Kaplans slashed fees by 20% to lure fresh occupants. 5 vacancies filled by spring 1945. Yet the churn stayed elevated compared to their other holdings. Folks averaged 14 months before departing. Departure talk showed a recurring theme. The spaces were stunning. The spot was prime, but an indefinable quality in the edifice left them on edge. The atmosphere weighed heavy. Some called it eerily still. A handful spoke of unsettling visions that faded after relocating. Vincent Russo began to sense the shifts as well. He'd occupied a ground-floor unit ever since the conversion wrapped up. Yet in 1946, he sought approval to relocate to the garage apartments. The Kaplans challenged his choice, pointing out that the ground-floor space was bigger and handier. Russo cited his desire for distance between home and work as the motive. In truth, a detail he confided solely to his spouse. Restful nights in the primary structure had escaped him. He'd jolt awake at 3 a.m. Certain footsteps echoed in the corridors. Upon checking, he'd discover no one there. The unease lingered on. Then, in 1947, a renter by the name of Margaret Sullivan passed away in her 4th-floor unit. At 72, she'd endured frail health for years. Her demise was ordinary, chalked up to heart failure. Yet it unsettled the other dwellers that she'd been solitary and gone unnoticed for 3 days post-mortem. A neighbor tipped off the superintendent only after papers piled up at her entrance. Quote, 0, the residents murmured. Quote, 1. The Kaplan siblings offloaded Seaview Terrace in January 1949 to a Boston-rooted real estate investment group for $175,000, a figure shy of what the pair had sunk in 9 years prior. The acquiring trust aimed to keep running it as rentals, yet scarcely 18 months later, they grappled with empty units and gripes from occupants. Ownership shifted again in 1951, then 1953. Every transaction meant a financial hit for the seller. Fresh proprietors each time figured they'd crack the code that eluded those before. Instead, familiar woes emerged. Warming the place proved tricky. Occupants departed sans obvious cause. Upkeep expenses ballooned beyond estimates. Odd events piled up. One dweller spotted a silhouette on the tower stairs that dissolved upon pursuit. Someone else insisted the elevator activated solo, sans summons, halting at the fourth floor to reveal vacant corridors beyond the parting doors. Such tales got brushed off as fancy or hype, but they fueled a notoriety that scared off potential lessees. By 1958, Seaview Terrace had cycled through 6 proprietors over 18 years. The latest had slashed rents so low the structure just scraped by on basics. 10 of its 15 units sat empty. The holdouts were short timers, lingering mere months before vanishing. The edifice, Edson Bradley erected to herald his status among Newport's upper crust, had devolved into a fringe asset. Too skimpy on returns for upgrades, too trivial in worth for teardown. Perched on its Atlantic-facing bluff, it crumbled bit by bit, biding time until fate's arbiter emerged. That figure showed up come spring, 1959. The site changed hands anew, falling to a non-profit eyeing it for communal purposes. These buyers envisioned transforming Seaview Terrace into housing for senior ladies. Major overhauls loomed, but with funds locked in and crews poised, they dove in. Work kicked off that summer of 1959, stretching into 1960. Partition walls came down, reviving portions of the layout's initial expanse. Shared zones took shape on the lower level. Sleeping quarters filled the stories above. The lower level housed clinic spaces and offices for management. It debuted as a home for elders in January 1961, built for 48 women. In half a year, 42 slots filled. But the grievances from the rental era cropped up once more. Inmates felt chills even with proper warmth. Employees shunned spots like the tower and fourth floor. A handful of women sought swaps for quarters without solid rationale. Helpers cycled out at an alarming clip. The group's overseers blamed the structure's antiquity and the hurdles of repurposing a personal abode into a group setup. They sidestepped the implications of the recurring issues. Seaview Terrace wasn't just tough to upkeep. It grew untenable for ease of dwelling. And by 1966, Tinseltown would descend to capture Unreal, a site that embodied the fiction before lenses ever rolled. That fall of 1965, TV maker Dan Curtis hunkered in his Manhattan workspace, sifting through site snaps for an endeavor gripping him across the prior year and a half. At 40, Curtis had ditched sales for TV crafting amid the 1950s boom. Prior to that, Curtis had worked on game shows and variety series, which brought in good money but left him craving more artistic fulfillment. He yearned for a fresh approach and came up with a bold idea. A gothic daytime serial unfolding in the modern era, yet shadowed by history's ghosts. The narrative centered on the Collins family, heirs to a prosperous New England lineage whose sprawling manor hid 200 years of grim mysteries. Elements like spirits, hexes, and ultimately a vampire would weave through the plot. Aimed at the demographic fueling soap opera's popularity, the program was slated for 5 episodes weekly in the late afternoon slot. Though hesitant, ABC leaders greenlit the pitch and greenlit a 13-week run starting in June 1966. With just 6 months to pull together actors, scriptwriters, and shooting sites, Curtis faced his biggest hurdle, securing the ideal mansion to represent Collinwood, the Collins' foreboding home. The structure needed to evoke generational opulence and authority on a grand scale. Preferably Gothic revival with towers and intricate design flourishes. It also required seclusion amid expansive grounds mimicking a secluded domain, all while being reachable from New York for the studio shot interiors. For months, Curtis and his site researcher combed New England, snapping photos of scores of properties from Massachusetts up to Maine. None quite measured up. Many 19th-century Gothic mansions had been razed or repurposed for public institutions, and the few still privately held were off-limits for production. As options dwindled, the scout proposed checking out Newport. On a dreary November morning in 1965, They headed there. The scout had compiled a roster of places to inspect. Curtis toured the Breakers, Marble House, and Rosecliff, each striking in its way but not quite fitting. The Breakers felt overly lavish, Marble House too neoclassical, and Rosecliff too fragile. He sought a moodier vibe, a place that seemed to whisper hidden tales. Then the scout brought up one more option, Seaview Terrace, then a home for senior women, but open to exterior shots with proper coordination. Late that afternoon, they reached the estate on Ochre Point Avenue. Curtis first glimpsed it as a stark outline against the fading light. Its limestone exterior climbed 4 stories, crowned by a tower rising yet another story beyond the roof. Irregular dormers and turrets punctuated the skyline. Perched commandingly on the cliff, it stood apart from nearby homes, buffered by high walls and untamed foliage. In that instant, Curtis knew this was Collinwood. He reached out to the property's overseeing group and secured approval for TV exterior filming. The cost was reasonable, under $500 for full access in the initial season. The managers welcomed the revenue and viewed the crew's presence as harmless. Curtis scheduled his team to come back come springtime to film the scenes that would recur across the series. When Dark Shadows debuted on June 27, 1966, audiences nationwide met Seaview Terrace, reimagined simply as Collinwood. The backstory positioned the Collinses as offspring of a fortune started in 1690 within the made-up Collinsport, Maine. Their Collinwood had undergone multiple rebuilds over the ages, the latest in the 1890s, adopting French Renaissance aesthetics. Leading the present-day household were Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, an isolated widow confined to the grounds for 18 years, her daughter Carolyn, and Elizabeth's sibling, Roger Collins, alongside his boy David. Enter Victoria Winters, a newcomer hired as David's governess, whose arrival unearthed long-suppressed clan enigmas. Through its opening half-year, Dark Shadows faltered in drawing viewers. Viewership numbers lagged badly, prompting ABC bosses to mull of pulling the plug. Sensing the urgency, Curtis plotted a bold pivot to revive it. Come December 1966, his gamble reshaped the series from a shaky trial into a sensation. He unveiled Barnabas Collins, a long-lost relative locked in a coffin since 1795, now freed by mishap and drawn back to Collinwood. Portrayed by Canadian performer Jonathan Frid, the vampire infused surprising nuance and pathos into a role that could have been mere horror cliché. This arc turned the tide. Viewership surged consistently into the spring of 1967. By summertime, Dark Shadows topped ABC's daytime lineup. Admirers' letters poured in by the thousands. Jonathan Frid emerged as an unexpected star. The series persisted until April 1971, delivering a grand total of 1,225 episodes and cementing its status as one of television's most unforgettable offerings. Over its 5-year span, Seaview Terrace served as the exterior for Collinwood. Dan Curtis's team made regular trips back to Newport to capture more scenes. The estate featured in the opening sequence of each installment, its spire outlined against brooding storm skies. Audiences unfamiliar with New England forged deep links between the structure and the eerie vibe Curtis had crafted. For countless viewers, the mansion stood as an emblem of vampires, specters, and the shadowy mysteries hidden by affluent clans behind stone walls. The actors and technicians who journeyed to Newport for shoots observed traits in Seaview Terrace that suited Curtis's vision perfectly. The place truly seemed cursed. Its secluded position amplified a sense of disquiet. The turret, reached via a tight winding stairwell, carried an indescribable sense of wrongness. Multiple staffers described chills within the walls even on temperate days. One cinematographer noted his gear failing oddly in the turret chamber, while working fine in other areas. Such incidents sparked chatter among the group, yet no one probed deeply. It was an aged edifice after all. Old structures had their oddities. Nobody hinted that Seaview Terrace could be the sort of haunt dark shadows imagined for Collinwood. Jonathan Frid, who lingered at the site longer than most performers, would later describe how the mansion unsettled him in elusive ways. In a long-after interview, he called it stifling. The turret troubled him most. During a filming pause, he ascended it once and vowed not to go back. Pressed for details on his encounter, Frid brushed it off. "Merely a sensation," he replied. "Not somewhere I'd hang around." The program's fame outlasted its broadcast. Dark Shadows hit syndication in 1975 and has rerun non-stop on cable networks to this day. A theatrical movie debuted in 1970 with a sequel in 1971. A nighttime revival aired in 1991. Tim Burton's big-screen version featuring Johnny Depp arrived in 2012. Every version drew fresh crowds to Collinwood and thus to Seaview Terrace. Devotees turned the estate into a holy spot, motoring to Newport to spot it and snap selfies by the entrance. Unbeknownst to them, while Dark Shadows shot there, the actual dwellers faced troubles unrelated to the production. The elder care facility kept running, but employee churn persisted as an issue. Inhabitants griped about chilly spaces and restless nights. In 1968, an 81-year-old resident, Dorothy Hammond, tumbled down the grand stairs and succumbed to her wounds. Officials deemed it an accident, blaming unsteady footing and dim illumination. Alternative theories stayed unspoken, despite claims from others that Mrs. Hammond had glimpsed shadows in the corridors in the lead-up. The lenses recorded a house embodying its role, where gloom wasn't staged by crew, but simply exposed. When the series wrapped in 1971, the structure endured. Its lore, now etched in stone, tied eternally to Gothic chills. The last Dark Shadows episode, broadcast on April 2nd, 1971. By that point, it had churned out 1,225 installments over 5 seasons, building a loyal following that kept the legacy alive for years. Dan Curtis shifted to new ventures. The performers scattered to fresh gigs, but Jonathan Frid stayed linked to Barnabas Collins indefinitely. Seaview Terrace persisted. The nonprofit managing the retirement home grappled with the persistent woes that had troubled prior stewards. Room bookings wavered. Worker attrition stayed high. Tenants voiced grievances over issues executives couldn't fully resolve. By 1972, the group decided sustaining Seaview Terrace, as housing proved too costly. The property demanded major fixes beyond their budget. Expenses outstripped fees from occupants. After 11 years of attempting the shift, they listed it for sale. The $300,000 price tag accounted for its state and the challenges in repurposing such a vast manor. During 1973 and 1974, a number of prospective purchasers inspected the estate. One hotel entrepreneur weighed turning it into a small luxury hotel, but backed out after learning that repairs would cost over $2 million. An independent academy investigated adapting it for dormitory purposes, only to conclude that it failed to comply with modern safety standards. A land investor bid $200,000 with plans to tear down the house and divide the grounds into home lots. Yet community advocates halted the deal via regulatory disputes. The site remained vacant throughout 1975 and well into 1976. The nonprofit group kept covering basic upkeep expenses. The landscaping grew wild and untamed. Debris clogged the pool. Intruders shattered multiple panes of glass. Area youth figured out how to slip inside via an unsecured side entrance and started holding gatherings there. Nearby residents alerted the Newport authorities to the disturbances. When patrols arrived at the scene, they sensed an eerie quality to the place. The young people they removed insisted on hearing steps upstairs despite no other occupants. The responders chalked it up to booze and overactive minds, though their logs mentioned a heavy, disquieting vibe permeating the structure, even under the sun. Come spring, 1976, a local educational institution contacted the group regarding a possible acquisition of Seaview Terrace. Salve Regina College, established in 1934 as a Catholic institution for women, had expanded considerably over the intervening years. It already repurposed various Newport Grand homes for educational and living quarters. Ochre Court, an enormous French-style castle constructed by the Gaulle family in 1892, functioned as the school's primary administrative hub. Wakehurst, yet another opulent-era property, accommodated lecture halls and workspaces. Seaview Terrace promised extra room for office needs and perhaps residence for pupils. The institution bought the site in August 1976 for $225,000. Upgrades started right away. The main level got outfitted with executive suites. Higher levels transformed into living areas for students. Updated sprinkler setups were added for fire safety. Power lines received thorough modernizations. The steeple, judged too risky for everyday pupil traffic, got sealed off and secured. These improvements tallied more than $800,000 overall, though the school possessed the funds to execute them thoroughly. Salve Regina College, renamed Salve Regina University in 1991, has held Seaview Terrace for almost 50 years now. Today, it accommodates executive spaces on the bottom levels and supports diverse roles within the academic circle. On grounds it's called Carey Mansion, honoring George and Edna Carey, who contributed money toward its upkeep and upgrades in 1984. Learners attending sessions inside mentioned the identical chili patches and uneasy feel that prior dwellers and renters had noted for years prior to the school's takeover. The steeple stays bolted shut. Officials point to security issues as the reason, yet custodians who've gone in for fixes describe it as oddly distinct from the rest of the premises in indefinable manners. The link to dark shadows endures in memory. The university honors this past and from time to time allows press entry for features or films on the series. Enthusiasts still drop by, snapping pictures of the outside from nearby roads. Internal guided visits remain unavailable to outsiders, but the school has partnered with Dark Shadows events and milestone gatherings, viewing the site's tie to the program as a distinctive historical element. Over time, various ghost hunting teams have sought clearance to probe Seaview Terrace. The university has routinely turned them down. The stated rationale is that the facility actively supports educational operations and isn't available for recreational or fringe science probes. Behind the scenes, leaders aim to steer clear of fueling otherworldly theories about a space where scholars reside and study. Still, the tales linger. Those who've resided in Seaview Terrace when it served as lodging quarters describe incidents echoing accounts from prior eras. Objects vanish, then turn up again. Entryways shut on their own after being left ajar. Sounds of pacing resound through deserted corridors. Many pupils brush these off as typical oddities of aged architecture, while others deem the setting bothersome enough to seek relocation to alternative on-site accommodations. The property's physical state demands ongoing care. The university has poured millions into repairs and revamps across the years. The rooftop got fully redone in 1998. The stone exterior saw major washing and fixes from 2005 through 2008. Panes have undergone refurbishment or substitution wherever required. Over the years, the interior of the mansion has undergone several renovations to adapt to evolving institutional requirements and comply with modern building standards. These expenditures have ensured that Seaview Terrace remains a viable structure, sparing it from the decay that has overtaken many other Newport properties, while also highlighting the staggering, perpetual expense of upkeeping Gilded Age edifices. The trend established in the Bradley family's time has persisted across all later proprietors. Seaview Terrace requires far more upkeep than typical owners expect. It poses challenges that defy complete solutions. It impacts its inhabitants in subtle, yet frequently noted ways that are hard to verify. Whether these influences stem from the architecture, the past events, or a mix of elements is open to debate. The litany of misfortunes tied to Seaview Terrace can be catalogued with stark accuracy. Edson Bradley passed away in the tower room in 1928. Joseph Freridman saw his full investment vanish, leading to bankruptcy by 1936. And he died in straitened conditions in 1942. Dorothy Hammond plunged to her death down the grand staircase in 1968. A student who resided there temporarily when it served as dormitory quarters in the 1980s, took her own life 3 months after leaving. Although no clear link to her stay at Seaview Terrace was proven, 2 maintenance staff members in the 1990s suffered fatal heart attacks on the job inside the building. Both were younger than 60 and had no previous heart issues. Individually, these incidents might be chalked up to chance, health factors, or timing. Viewed together, however, they form a sequence that troubles many observers. The enigma surrounding Seaview Terrace from the Bradley period onward lingers unanswered. Does the structure bear blame for the woes piling up inside it? Or does it merely draw in already fraught individuals and situations? Gothic lore holds that sites can carry curses, with layered sorrows tainting the very ground. Skeptics dismiss this, blaming chance and biased accounts for any perceived trends. Each viewpoint holds some validity. Perched on its Atlantic-facing cliff, Seaview Terrace endures, uncondemned yet unabsolved. In 1975, the architectural value of Seaview Terrace earned official status on the National Register of Historic Places. This honor celebrated it as a prime specimen of French Renaissance Revival design and one of Newport's final grand Gilded Age residences. The recognition offered safeguards against razing the site and opened doors to preservation funding without limiting changes to the interior. It also validated long-standing claims by conservation experts. Seaview Terrace marked a key moment in U.S. architectural evolution, irrespective of the hardships afflicting its residents. Howard Greenlee, who crafted the estate for Edson Bradley, passed away in 1963 at 84, well before the mansion gained notoriety via Dark Shadows. His professional life featured numerous projects for affluent patrons across the Northeast. Yet Seaview Terrace stood as his grandest and boldest home commission. Scholars examining Greenlee's designs praise how he delivered precisely what Bradley envisioned, a residence rivaling Newport's elite properties. That it harbored traits rendering it unfit for easy living was beyond Greenlee's foresight or control. The tower, central to both Bradley's demise and the site's eerie allure, drew special scrutiny from architects. Soaring 5 levels above the primary roof, it offered little utility save for a vantage point. Its access via a tight winding stair was precarious. The top observation chamber, just 12 feet across, could scarcely fit more than a trio. Architecturally, the tower functioned as an aesthetic flourish, a tall flourish lending the facade a memorable profile from afar. That it forged a secluded nook where Bradley could escape his woes and meet his end was an unforeseen byproduct of the blueprint. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Seaview Terrace's fame swelled among Dark Shadows enthusiasts. Gatherings for the series pulled in crowds by the thousands, with fans frequently journeying to Newport to snap pictures of the icon. The university welcomed these enthusiasts, to a degree, recognizing the site's tie to the program as a distinctive cultural legacy. In 1991, NBC tried to bring back Dark Shadows as a primetime show, prompting the production team to head back to Newport for fresh shots of Seaview Terrace's exterior. Although the reboot lasted just 12 episodes before getting axed, it sparked fresh enthusiasm for the classic series and drew yet another crowd to the estate's entrance. The tie-in to Dark Shadows turned out to be a major economic boost. Sightseeing companies in the area started adding Seaview Terrace to their itineraries. Shops around town stocked merchandise inspired by the show. Officials at the Newport Tourism Board acknowledged how the program had embedded the city into mainstream entertainment, far surpassing its image as a playground for the elite during summer months. Remarkably, Seaview Terrace had emerged as one of the area's signature attractions. The 2012 movie version of Dark Shadows, helmed by Tim Burton with Johnny Depp playing Barnabas Collins, exposed the site to younger audiences. Even though filming took place mostly elsewhere, promotional content highlighted Seaview Terrace's legacy as the original Collinwood. The movie's debut unleashed a new wave of buzz. Staff in the university's communications department were suddenly handling a flood of press inquiries. While the spotlight was mostly appreciated, it underscored the persistent issue of overseeing a structure that served both as an active campus facility and a pop culture icon. Entering the early 2000s, the state of Seaview Terrace posed growing worries. Salt-laden winds kept eroding the limestone exterior, even after cleanings and fixes from the 1990s. Leaks had ruined much of the indoor plaster. Cracks in the tower hinted at underlying instability. In 2003, the university ordered a full engineering evaluation. The findings indicated no imminent risk of falling apart, but urgent interventions were needed to halt worsening damage. Fixing everything was projected to cost $4.2 million. To cover it, the school kicked off a targeted drive for donations aimed at safeguarding Seaview Terrace. Efforts stressed the site's design merits alongside its quirky fame and entertainment. Supporters included devotees of Dark Shadows, along with grads and groups focused on historic preservation. By 2006, enough money was secured to launch the biggest overhaul the building had ever seen. This project, which stretched into 2009, tackled both stability and visual issues. Matching stone from the same quarry restored the front. A complete new roof went up. Inside, updates brought rooms up to modern standards without losing their period charm. The tower got reinforced, yet stayed off limits for everyday use. During the process, crews uncovered long-buried building secrets. It turned out the elaborate plaster in the key reception areas came from Italian artisans, imported just for the Bradley project. Stripping away old paint layers brought to light decorative elements buried by past updates. Up in the tower space, etchings on the sill looked like count marks, but no one could pinpoint when or why they appeared. It was impossible to say if Edson Bradley scratched them in his last days or if they were older. Around the same time, the university funded a thorough chronicle of the estate's background. They brought on a regional expert to dig into records, old news stories, and talks with past occupants and staff. Finished in 2008, the study outlined the chain of owners, money woes, and odd incidents that marked the first 8 decades. The researcher pointed out the recurring bad luck, but chalked it up to business downturns, upkeep struggles, and the tough economics of keeping grand homes viable through the 1900s. No ghostly theories involved. Debates lingered over the tower's future. A few campus leaders pushed to open it for classes and tours. More took the stance that hazards and weak spots warranted sealing it off. Whispers about it being where Bradley died, plus reports from janitors and repair folks of eerie vibes, crept into talks, even if leaders shied from putting such things on the record. In the end, a 2010 ruling kept the tower shut down for the foreseeable future, allowing entry solely for upkeep and checks. The 2011 45th anniversary festivities for Dark Shadows featured a fan meetup in Newport. Hundreds joined a guided stroll that wrapped up right at Seaview Terrace's boundary. Access to the estate's grounds was granted by the university on a restricted basis, mainly for taking photos. A few participants mentioned sensing chilly areas or a vague discomfort while exploring the site, though such reports were viewed as typical elements of the enthusiast outing, not as genuine issues warranting deeper scrutiny. Its role as an academic asset has offered a degree of reliable oversight that previous proprietors could never secure. With ample funding, the school ensures the edifice receives thorough upkeep, along with a dedication to safeguarding it for years to come. Yet even under this solid structure, Seaview Terrace still poses ongoing hurdles. Employees stationed inside frequently seek reassignments. Learners placed in activities based there commonly seek moves elsewhere. Upkeep expenses routinely surpass estimates. The property demands greater oversight, funding, and administrative effort compared to similar campus edifices. Officials at the university who have managed Seaview Terrace through the decades describe it with a blend of admiration and exasperation. They recognize it as a stunning edifice, a gem of design that elevates the grounds. At the same time, it remains a steady wellspring of issues. When asked to detail the exact troubles, they list the standard woes tied to aging architecture, deterioration over time, structural shortcomings, neglected repairs, and harsh weather exposure. Scarcely any will consider queries on whether factors outside these tangible elements could explain the site's enduring troubles. They imply that such ideas belong in the realm of Gothic drama devotees. Still, the trend persists, extending a narrative that shows no sign of closing. In the present day, Seaview Terrace endures largely as it stood upon Edson Bradley's finishing of the build in 1925. Its stone exterior looms over the precipice location. To the east, a distinct tower stretches upward. The structure claims its 12 acres, with the imposing stature Bradley envisioned, in plain sight from Ocean Drive and the seaside path tracing the shoreline. Almost 100 years have elapsed since the manor debuted. In that span, it has seen the downfall of a vast wealth, the collapse of various enterprises, the passing of no fewer than 7 individuals inside its confines, and the shift of U.S. society from the Gilded Age via the broadcast period to our current online age. It has functioned as a personal home, a gentleman's club, rental units, elder care residence, and academic venue. It has been captured in images by countless visitors, examined by design scholars, probed by supernatural investigators, and a holy site for admirers of a series that wrapped up over half a century back. Presently, Seaview Terrace functions for Salve Regina University as an office and versatile hub. Ground-level spaces hold administrative suites. Conference areas and gathering spots occupy parts of the higher stories. The Grand Hall, partitioned amid the rental phase and later revived through updates, now accommodates school events. The reading room that formerly stored Edson Bradley's rare volumes is filled with storage units and contemporary workstation gear. The tower stays secured. Undergrads pass by each day, aware of little more than its tie to dark shadows. To the broader student body, Seaview Terrace is just one more structure on site, standing out chiefly for its scale and stylistic flair. Yet the stories keep coming. A maintenance supervisor from the 2000s who oversaw operations inside shared that device failures happened far more often than expected. Climate controls would break in certain chambers while operating fine in others. Power breakers would flip for no clear reason. Entrances kept bolted would turn up ajar at dawn. Urged to account for these events, the supervisor admitted that vintage sites bring repair demands, yet he pointed out that Seaview Terrace brought more demands than fellow heritage buildings nearby, with disruptions clustering in set zones, namely the higher stories and the tower steps. A resident student who stayed there temporarily, back when it included living quarters, recalled rousing at 3 a.m. to footfalls echoing in the corridor beyond her door. She figured it was a fellow occupant coming back from late-night work. Peering out after opening up, she found the passage deserted. The sounds ceased right as she looked. This repeated over 3 nights in a row. By the 4th evening, she sought a housing switch. It was approved promptly, implying such shifts were commonplace. Tales like these, along with scores more across the years, form a recurring theme that's hard to brush off completely. Those who linger in Seaview Terrace encounter happenings they struggle to rationalize. Such occurrences persist, regardless of the era, the nature of habitation, or the backgrounds of those living or working there. Individuals sharing these accounts typically arrive without any awareness of prior similar tales, indicating they stem from direct encounters rather than preconceived notions or influence. Deciding if these events signify true otherworldly occurrences or merely the mental toll of residing in a site steeped in sorrow is ultimately subjective. Scholarly examinations of purportedly ghostly places have yet to agree on criteria, separating authentic supernatural hotspots from those famed only for their eerie lore. Influences, like low-frequency sounds, magnetic disturbances, and atmospheric conditions, can trigger bodily reactions and mental states that folks mistake for ghostly presences. Aged structures with uneven climate control often yield fluctuating warmth and odd noises. Expectation alone can amplify ordinary happenings into something perceived as bizarre. Seaview Terrace embodies every one of these potential confounders. As an antique edifice with intricate mechanics, it bears a thoroughly recorded legacy of misfortune that any inquiring mind would uncover. Its role in a shadowy TV drama, which depicted it outright as a spectral abode, adds further layers. Thorough probes must weigh these elements prior to deeming any spectral happenings real. Nevertheless, even when factoring in all such variables, the steady and detailed nature of testimonies over almost 100 years implies that the structure itself exerts some profound influence on those who linger inside. The tower stands out as the prime source of unease over time. Maintenance crews venturing into it for repairs note an ambiance unlike anywhere else in the house. The atmosphere hangs dense. The chill intensifies noticeably. The area conveys a profound unease that's hard to put into words. Though these impressions are personal and tough to quantify, they originate from pragmatic workers, uninterested in fueling ghost stories. Pinning down if Seaview Terrace truly harbors spirits yields no clear verdict. Those who embrace the supernatural highlight the buildup of proof, the recurring narratives, the thread of calamities. Doubters argue that all aspects yield to rational explanations, with any patterns tied to financial and societal pressures instead of ethereal meddling. Each viewpoint holds merit. The fairest assessment might be that Seaview Terrace defies neat labels. It evades being outright haunted or wholly ordinary. This is a place where elegance and hardship have intertwined for close to a century, where bold design birthed rooms that challenge comfortable human use, where layers of backstory have imbued the edifice with a palpable gravity that guests sense, even if they can't define it. The origin of that gravity, whether spectral energies or the emotional burden of the site's chronicle, matters less than recognizing its presence. The mansion's endurance marks a victory. Scores of Newport estates have vanished through demolition in the last 100 years. Market shifts that rendered grand homes like Seaview Terrace unviable for personal ownership claim nearly all peers. Yet Seaview Terrace endures, operational and attracting crowds to its entrance, embodying a durability that outstrips the woes of its initial proprietors. It has surpassed every figure linked to its stormy image. Edson Bradley, Joseph Freriedman, the string of proprietors who battled to turn a profit, the keepers who abandoned it, the dwellers who perished, all have passed. The structure persists. Oversight by Salve Regina University delivers the stability past efforts lacked, the academic backing and enduring dedication required to sustain such a vast landmark. Officials there plan to retain ownership indefinitely. Substantial funds have poured into renovations. with steady allocations for upkeep ahead. The property now weaves into the school's fabric, securing its legacy well into the future. No matter the debates surrounding Seaview Terrace, demolition looms nowhere. Decay won't claim it. It will perch on its seaside bluff for ages yet. The tower continues to pierce the skyline, its lookout chamber reachable via the tight winding steps. Barred to idle explorers, the surrounding grounds bloom anew under careful tending, while the grand hall endures, partitioned yet revived and repurposed for today's needs. The whole is safeguarded yet evolved, straddling heritage and innovation. It dwells in that awkward limbo between yesterday and now, much like countless preserved landmarks. Those who visit Seaview Terrace in the present day will find their experience shaped mostly by their own expectations. Devotees of dark shadows perceive it as Collinwood. Lovers of architecture recognize an outstanding instance of French Renaissance revival design. Learners view it as part of a school facility. Those who embrace the supernatural regard it as a truly eerie sight. Doubters dismiss it as an aged structure whose fame outstrips its actual substance. Each viewpoint holds some validity. Seaview Terrace embodies all these aspects at once. Along the Rhode Island shoreline sits a grand estate that has endured for almost 100 years, gazing out as Atlantic breakers pound the rocks beneath. It has sheltered the wealthy and the retired, functioned as rental units and student quarters, featured in 1,000 TV installments and innumerable snapshots. It has observed fatalities and financial ruins, comings and goings, sorrows both grand and everyday. People have dubbed it stunning yet suffocating, splendid yet unsettling, hexed or simply unlucky. Following 100 years under the stewardship of numerous proprietors, dwellers, and organizations, just one fact holds firm. Seaview Terrace persists. Perched atop its promontory, it remains partly enigmatic and not wholly comprehended, layering fresh layers onto its legacy annually, continuing to exact a steeper toll from its inhabitants than typical structures demand, while posing obstacles that defy easy fixes. What Edson Bradley constructed as a declaration of his supremacy evolved into a tribute to the boundaries of mortal drive and the tenacity of sites that defy the commonplace. It shall remain upright, well beyond the time when all who now grasp its tales have vanished, gathering additional episodes, occupants, and enigmas. The structure persists simply because edifices are built to do so. They survive beyond our own span.